So I recently went on a 2-week solo backpacking trip around Taiwan, and I filmed the whole trip and turned it into a travel documentary with the imaginative title of 2 Weeks in Taiwan. But in this video, I'm going to break down the itinerary of what I did in those 2 weeks. I'm going to go through where I stayed, how long I stayed there, what was the accommodation, what activities I did, what transport I used, all the nitty-gritty info which can help you plan your trip to Taiwan. Now I had 2 full weeks there, but let's say you've only got a week to explore Taiwan. You can very easily pick and choose which bits you want from my itinerary because it's so easy to travel around there. With the high-speed rail, you can travel from one end of the island to the other in like half a day. Now, when you land in Taipei, the first thing you're going to want to get is an Easy Card. And they sell these in vending machines at the airport near the train station. But you can use this card for a lot of public transport around all of Taiwan. So I used it for all the metros and all the buses that I got. The trains that I got from one city to another I actually bought a ticket for, but everything else I just used the Easy Card. So you need to get some cash out and then buy it from the machine. And then when a credit gets low, you just go to a 7-Eleven and just top it up there. So my trip, like pretty much everyone's in Taiwan, began in Taipei. I had 3 days and 3 nights there because I landed at like 5:30 in the morning, and I booked an extra night in my hostel for the night before so that as soon as I landed I could just get into my room rather than having to wait around all day to check in. And the hostel that I stayed at was Meander Hostel in the Shimen neighborhood, which is this really fun, lively neighborhood. So my first day in Taipei, I hiked up Elephant Mountain, which takes about 20 minutes to walk up to the viewpoint. I went up Taipei 101, and when you get in the building, you have to like get the elevator up to the 5th floor, and then you can buy your tickets from there. And a standard ticket takes you to the 89th floor for the views from there. I bought a ticket that also took me to the 101st floor because I wanted to go to the top, but really that was a waste of money. It was like this sort of secret garden kind of Instagram-y kind of place, but you don't need to go up there. The 89th floor's enough. On my second day in Taipei, I went to the Chiang Kai-shek Memorial, went to Diao Old Street, went back to Elephant Mountain for sunset, and then in the evening I went to Rao Street for the night market, which was absolutely fantastic. But if you're trying to get lots of ideas of what to do in Taipei, I'm going to give a quick shout out to my friends Caroline and Neil, who run a travel blog called Tai Wanderers. And wherever you're going in Taiwan, they've got loads of tips and recommendations for whatever you're going to do. So after you've watched this video, I'd say go check out their website because I found it super useful for my trip. And on my third day in Taipei, I was doing this day trip out the city, and my original plan was to hike up Mount Teapot and then explore Jofa and Old Street after it, but the weather turned out to be really bad, so I didn't get to do the hike. So instead, I went to Jofa and Old Street, and then I hopped on a bus and a train to Shifen Old Street, explored the old village there, and also walked out to Shifen Waterfall. You can, from Taipei, just book a driver, like a private driver, to take you around all these little towns in one day. Like you could even book it from a hostel, but the public transport's so good here anyway, it's just super easy to do on your own. Now, at the very end of my trip, I had an extra day in Taipei, but I'm going to go through that now just so all the Taipei stuff is together. So when I got back there from Taipei, I did a day trip to Yangmingshan National Park, which took like an hour to get there on a bus. I did a hike up Mount Xixing, starting at the Lengchunkeng Visitor Center, probably not pronouncing that right, but you just have to bear with me. And I hiked back down on the other side, and I went past that flower clock. You might have seen lots of the brochure pictures for Yangmingshan. That's not worth your time. But from there, I got a bus to Beitou District, which is like the north of Taipei, and that's where I went to the hot springs. And there are some public hot springs there, which you can just show up and buy a ticket for and go in, and you'll be bathing, probably nude with other people, but it was the end of my trip, and I just wanted like a private experience just to relax in. So I went onto Klook.com, and on there I managed to book a private hot spring at the Ket Hotel. So Klook.com was very useful for booking lots of different bits and pieces on this trip. So after Taipei, I moved on to Sun Moon Lake, and to get there, you simply get the train from Taipei main station down to Taichung, then catch the bus from Taichung to Sun Moon Lake. And all in all, that'll take you about 2 hours. Now I had like a day and a half or 2 nights at Sun Moon Lake, but honestly, everything I did there, you could easily just squeeze into one day. So one option you could do is from Taipei, get the train to Taichung, put your bags in luggage storage at the station there, and then go explore Taichung for the day, and then in the evening get the bus to Sun Moon Lake. So you'll still have 2 nights there, but then you have like just 1 day to cycle around the lake. And you can always squeeze in that cable car ride whilst you're doing the bike loop. The hostel I stayed at was Dreamy Nomads Hostel, and that was probably the best hostel I stayed at on the entire trip. Like, I made friends straight away there. And the electric bike that I booked for doing the loop around the lake, I booked through the hostel. There's a bike rental place underneath the hostel, so it all just worked out nice and easy. And I would recommend getting an e-bike because the loop around the lake isn't just a flat path. It's like sometimes you're on the road, sometimes you're going up and down and stuff. So I would get an e-bike and I loved it so much. And that was one of the best days of the trip, looping around Sun Moon Lake. Then I moved on to ALISHAN. Now, there's only like 1 or 2 buses that run a day from Sun Moon Lake to ALISHAN, and so the guy running the hostel booked me a spot on the bus for me. Although when I actually showed up to the bus, there was like tons of space, so I don't know if it was necessary or not, but it's just something to keep in mind when you're traveling from one to the other. I was staying at the Yin Shan Hotel, which was by far the most expensive accommodation I had on the entire trip, but I'll be doing a full budget breakdown video next week. But the reason it was so expensive was just because you're up in the mountains and like they can charge whatever they want. Now my plan was to have a day and a half in ALISHAN, but my time got cut short because a typhoon came in, so I only had a half day to explore it. What I did in that half day was the Sisters Pond Trail and the Giant Tree Trail. Now, if my time there hadn't been cut short by the typhoon and I could have explored a bit more, I certainly would have done the Sunrise Trail in the morning. Like at a visitor center, they'll say what time the Sunrise train's going from and you can book your ticket from the train station. That's supposed to be like one of the highlights of Taiwan, is getting up to see that sunrise in the morning with the clouds over the mountains, but I didn't get to do it. A couple of other things I would have loved to have checked out in that area is at Fingshihu. I have no idea how to pronounce it, but that place, that's where you can do the trail through the bamboo forests. And also very near there is Shishu. I'm sure people will correct my pronunciation in the comments, but that's where you can do the trails to the tea farms. Now, to get there from the main ALISHAN village, there's a bus that will take you all the way there, which takes about an hour. And then at the end of the day, you can take that back to your hotel. Or if you're traveling light and don't mind hiking with your gear, you can take the bus, do those bits, and then at the end of the day, take the bus down to Chiayi. Or I reckon if you asked the visitor center, they might have been able to arrange a taxi to take you to those places like for the day. But yeah, that region was so beautiful, so I really wish I had more time to explore it and see these things that I'm suggesting now. So hopefully you'll get to do it on your visit to Taiwan. Also, where I stayed to sort of wait out the typhoon in Chiayi, apparently that town's really good for food. Like, it's a restaurant called Smartfish I had a few people recommend to me, but because I was there during a typhoon, everything was shut. Anyway, moving on to KAOHSUING. The train from Chiayi to KAOHSUING only takes like an hour, so I was there in no time at all. But at this point, I should say, when I was booking train tickets, if I bought my ticket from a vending machine, it wouldn't come with a reserved seat. So one time I couldn't find a seat in the train, and there's a couple of other times I was like in a reserved area, just hoped no one would come and sit in that seat. But the easiest way to get reserved seats on the trains is actually just to queue for the ticket office, and they always spoke really good English. Like even later in the trip when I was in YULI on the East Coast, which was more off the beaten track and very few people in that town seemed to speak English, the guy at the ticket office at the train station still was absolutely fine with it. So if you want to get a reserved seat on the trains, just go to the ticket office rather than the ticket machines. Maybe you can get them from the ticket machines, but I didn't figure out how to do that. Anyway, KAOHSUING, I stayed at a hostel called Dwell Hostel, which is very central and worked out really nicely. The places I checked out were Pier 2 Art Centre, which apparently is quite lively in the evening around there, but I wasn't there for that. I went up to the Love Lookout for that cool view over the city. I got the MRT to Hualien Station to see the Weiwu Mimi Village, but that's where they had all the street art, which was fantastic actually, and it's only a few minutes on the MRT, so it's definitely worth the little detour to go see all that amazing art. And then in the evening I went to Leo Night Market and got loads of great food there. One thing I didn't check out in KAOHSUING was Lotus Pond, where they have all these amazing pagodas around this like lake. And the reason I didn't check it out was because they're all under reconstruction right now, but by the time that you manage to travel to Taiwan, it could all be sorted again. So make a note of Lotus Pond. Now the following morning, before I moved on to Kenting, I went to check out Sijin Island. And this is a place that you can hire out a bike and do a bit of exploring around, maybe go surfing. I didn't have much luck there because there's lots of damage from the typhoon and lots of the trail was just blocked. But even if it wasn't, I didn't rate the place that highly. Like, I wouldn't put it as a top thing to sort of include in your itinerary. So if you want a chill day, just somewhere to go and relax and sort of get out of the big city, then check out Sijin Island. But if you've got limited time in Taiwan, then personally I wouldn't prioritize going to see it. Now, moving on to Kenting. Kenting's at the very southern tip of Taiwan, and the national park there is famous for like beautiful beaches and amazing snorkeling. To get from Kaohsiung to Kenting, there is a direct bus that'll take you all the way there, but it's actually quicker to get the train from Kaohsiung to Fangleo, and then pick up the bus from there down to Kenting. I was staying at the Kenting Original Backpackers Hostel, and that was also one of the best ones I stayed on the trip. Like, I made friends instantly there. The night market there was super fun, like the best one I went to on the whole trip. But we were also there on the weekend when there was like an Ironman competition on, so maybe that had something to do with it. The place that we went snorkeling was Wan Latong Beach, and because we were in a big group, we got the bus to Hengchong and then got a taxi from there. In hindsight, we probably should have just got a taxi direct from Kenting to the snorkeling spot. But my original plan, if I hadn't made any friends and I was just going to be by myself, was just to hire out a scooter from Kenting for the day and go to lots of different snorkeling spots. So that's probably a quicker and easy way to hop around these different snorkeling sites in the Kenting region. But yeah, the snorkeling at Wan Latong was amazing. Apparently normally you can see sea turtles there, but because there'd just been a typhoon, I think they've been staying away from the shoreline. But from what I've read, normally your chances of seeing them there are pretty high. And then on the way back towards Kenting town, we stopped at South Bay, which is like this lovely white sand beach. Lots of water activities on offer and a few bars you can just hang out at as well. Now, moving on to the East Coast. I met some people on my trip who were going to the town of Taitung, but I went a little further to this small village called DULAN, which is supposed to be this kind of surfer hippie backpacker place. And it's supposed to be very lively on a weekend, but I was there on a Monday and it was dead. In DULAN, I was staying at the Travel Bug Hostel, which is a really great place, and my plan for there was to try and hire out a scooter and go on a bit of an adventure in the local area. But it turns out there was nowhere in DULAN that actually hired out scooters. So I was originally going to have 2 nights in DULAN, I just had one and decided to move on. Now, where I moved on to was a little town called YULI, which is in the East Rift Valley. And the East Rift Valley is a gorgeous area on the East Coast. If I was doing this trip again, I would have actually had 2 nights there and missed out DULAN altogether. So in YULI, there was no hostels, so I stayed at the Ket Hotel, which was like a couple of minutes walk from the train station. And then just by looking on Google Maps, I found a scooter hire place. And because this place was like more off the beaten track, most people there didn't speak English, but I just used Google Translate and it all worked out fine for hiring out my scooter and things like that. Even at the end of the day, when I had to refill the petrol in my tank of the scooter before I returned it to the rental place, I went to the petrol station. It was one of those self-serve machines and everything was in Mandarin. There was no English options, but I just held up my phone with Google Translate, went through the instructions, got it sorted fine. But anyway, the hike that I did there was the Walami Trail, and it's quite a popular hike because you don't need a permit to do it. Like some of the bigger hikes in Taiwan, you need to get a permit to go on those trails, and some of them can sell out a few months in advance, whilst this section, which was just like a 9-kilometer there and back, you can just show up and do. And that was one of the highlights of my trip. I absolutely loved that hike. And I wish I'd gotten to do more hikes like that if the weather had been more on my side during my time in Taiwan. Keep saying it, but this is brilliant. But yeah, I did the Walami Trail in the afternoon, and then in the morning I got one of the free bicycles from my hotel and went and did the Yufu biking trail. If I did have 2 nights there and like nearly 2 full days, then I would have kept the scooter for another day and done a lot more exploring in that area. So I probably would have gone up to the town of Roissy, that place. There's a few hot springs in that town, but also just in that area, I just did like a quick Google of like scooting around the East Rift Valley, and I got lots of suggestions of little like viewpoints and trails you could check out. So if I hadn't stopped in DULAN and had the scooter for another day, I could have probably had a really fun random adventure day exploring in the East Rift Valley. Arriving in Hualien, I was staying at the Wow Hostel, which is like 1-minute walk from the train station, so it was super convenient. This town is famous for being a hub for exploring Taroko National Park, but when I was there, Taroko National Park was closed because of the damage from an earthquake earlier in the year. I keep seeing conflicting things online, like some places say some of the trails are starting to open up, but I'm not quite sure. So that's something to be wary of if you go to Taiwan in the near future. What I would have loved to have done instead of the national park was gone kayaking on the coast, and you can book like a half-day activity through Klook again, or probably through your hostel, because on the shoreline there's these epic cliffs coming out of the water and you can go kayaking right near them, so it would have been really spectacular. The reason I didn't get to do it because the weather was bad on the day I was there, and the following day was a national holiday, so nothing was running. So if I'd had better luck with weather and timing, I would have definitely done that kayaking experience, even if the Taroko National Park was shut. And then after that, I looped back to Taipei and I had my final day there, which, as I mentioned earlier in the video, was when I went to Yangmingshan National Park and to the Beitou district for the private hot spring. And so that was my 2-week itinerary in Taiwan. Hopefully this has given you lots of different tips and ideas for your trip there. Like I mentioned in the main documentary, like traveling around Taiwan is so easy. Like the infrastructure is incredible, the journey times aren't that long, the people are super friendly, and enough of them speak English for there not to be like a huge language barrier. It's a beautiful country and there's not that many tourists, so you don't feel like you're just on this massive beaten track the whole time. But yes, you might have watched all of this and gone, that sounds lovely, but how much does it cost? So in the next video, I'm going to do a complete budget breakdown of the trip, telling you exactly what I spent where, how much was accommodation, travel, activities, all those different things. So make sure you've hit subscribe so you don't miss out on that, and I'll see you in the next video.